As I mentioned at the top of the program, we got a real problem with this push for a voice to Parliament in Victoria. Joining me now to discuss this is Executive Director of the Institute of Public Affairs, Scott Hargreaves. Great to see you, Scott. The numbers I mentioned at the top, 33 Assembly members, all on around just under $100,000 annual salary, 65 million allocated to something called the Self-Determination Fund. Most Victorians watching you and I here today wouldn't have a clue that this was happening in the background.
Well, thank you for putting the attention on it, Steve. It is truly terrible that after the overwhelming rejection of a divisive voice to Parliament at the federal election in a referendum, we're now seeing its junior cousin, a very divisive state voice to Parliament, being foisted upon us by the Allan government. And it is dividing Victorians. We've got a lot on our plate at the moment, as you know, Steve. We've got out-of-control debt, rising energy costs. The private sector is fleeing the state. But the activist Allan government is setting up this body to spend not just the tens of millions that you mentioned, but probably hundreds of millions across a range of projects on something that is going to divide Victorians by race, which is exactly what mainstream Australians rejected at the Voice to Parliament referendum.
Scott, Jacinda Allan, I think, came out today and said she's got a mandate to do this. Well, I don't remember it being a particularly high-profile policy discussion during the last campaign. I want to ask you why the secrecy. Do you think this is going to end in a treaty? That'll mean more taxpayers' money will be shovelled out the door. Don't Victorian taxpayers have the right to know what is being asked of the government on behalf of the voters of Victoria? What do these people want? What does this group want when they talk about treaty?
Well, as you know, Steve, it was actually the trifecta that they came up with, which was voice, treaty and truth. And we had something in Victoria called the Yuruk Commission, which was supposedly about truth, but as you know, it's actually come up with a very biased rendering of Victoria's history, deliberately suppressed evidence that might have challenged this new narrative that they're creating so that they can justify their divisive policies and stampede us towards a treaty. And we haven't heard much about it because that's not really how the activists operate. When they've got control of the levers of government, it's easier for them to forge ahead to actually deny the kind of outcomes that we saw in the Voice to Parliament referendum. And remember, it was in Victoria, still 54% of Victorians voted no. They don't want this. That's probably where their attention was. If they had a similar opportunity in Victoria, I've got no doubt they'd say the same thing, but they don't seem to be getting that opportunity.
Scott, I was thinking today about what's the actual impact of some of the negotiations and the Indigenous groups wanting things changed to their way of wanting it done. And I remembered, but of course, that Victoria quite recently, about a year ago, dropped the right of police to arrest anyone who was drunk in public. Now, that was a result of direct lobbying from Indigenous groups who were complaining. In the first instance, an example of an inebriated woman on a train that police took off the train and put in a jail cell, and tragically she passed away. But this is the sort of thing, if this treaty is enacted, that we'll be witnessing on a regular basis.
Yeah, a crazy change to the law like that shows what happens when you decide that racial injustice is at the heart of any negative social outcome anywhere, and that the only way to fix it is to carve out with special laws one section of the population and say that we're going to apply the laws differentially. So expect to see a lot more of that, taking us down the road that we've seen in America. And also, Steve, I'd also recommend have a look at the regional treaties that they've already been signing, say, including in Western Victoria, where we've seen a lot of changes to how public land is managed, a lot more red tape for councils, and all of it was done away from the public eye. The Allan government executed these agreements with the traditional owners in those areas, with putting incredibly onerous provisions on the local community, but the rest of the community just had no say in it.
I'm loath to do this to you, but here's the Premier today trying to explain this away. Have a look.
When you listen to people, you get better outcomes. And that's what treaty's all about. I reckon we're up for that. As a state, we are up for this. We're up for this very simple, common sense change of involving and listening First People in the decisions that affect them.
I don't know if there is audio of it, but why didn't someone in the, standing there questioning her say, but hang on a minute, 54% of Victorians said they didn't want a voice. What are you talking about?
Oh, absolutely. And don't we all love the idea of listening? We could all do with a little bit more listening in Victoria. Maybe they do something about plugging the deficit and stopping the unions running out of control and doing something about crime. But the other flaw in the rhetoric that the Premier is coming up there is who are they actually listening to? Is it really an Indigenous community, or is it really setting up a structure that will be taken over by activists, highly paid? There's already an incredible bureaucracy built up around this. It will attract exactly the sort of grievance mongers who don't want to focus on the things that unite us as Victorians, but they want to focus on the things that divide us, because that furthers their activism, and actually you can make a nice living out of it.
Well, let's hope that the opposition come out and say that if they win the election in November next year, I think Brad Batten spoke about this briefly today, that they'll scrap whatever is put in place. But once it's legislated, Scott, as you know, it's very difficult to unpick it. Appreciate your time very much tonight. Thanks very much for that. I'll talk to you shortly.